Hello, everyone. My name is Sohaila Bana. I'm with 94803 Emergency Preparedness Alliance. I'm also the president of West Contra Costa Fire Safe Council. We're honored to have our police chief, Bisa French, with us tonight because public safety is very important. So I'm asking Chief French to please start by telling us about the status of the police department, the hopes, the concerns, the issues, and then we'll have time for questions and answers after that. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, my name is Bisa French. I am the police chief here in the city of Richmond. I know there might be some people from El Sobrani on the call too. So, but I am the chief for the city of Richmond. And if you haven't heard, I'm just coming back to work. I've been back to work maybe about 3 or 4 weeks after being off for a family issue for nearly 10 months. So I'm still kind of getting up to date. So I've invited Captain Tim Simmons, who's the patrol captain for our agency, to join me on the call today. He is not on video, but he is listening in and can speak and will if needed. So thank you for having me tonight. Ms. Bana asked me to come and speak to you about kind of the status of the police department. And I think if you've listened to any city council meetings or even attended any neighborhood meetings, you might know that we are severely understaffed. We are in a staffing crisis right now. And I will say crisis because we have never experienced this low number of staffing within our department. And it's severely hampered our ability to respond to the needs of the community the way the community has come to expect us to respond. And so we've had to cut a lot of services, cut a lot of responses out. And what I mean by that is we don't respond to a lot of calls for service. So if there's some kind of what would be considered a low level crime that has occurred, then we don't even send an officer to respond. You have to go online to make a report. And it was a last resort for us to have to do this because as a resident and just what I would want in terms of service here in the city of Richmond, that if somebody broke into my car or any kind of victimization, I would want an officer to respond because we pay a lot of taxes here and people aren't victimized over and over again, generally. I mean, some people are, but that one time that I call the police, I want them to respond. And we're just at a point right now with our staffing that we're just unable to do that for all the calls for service. So I call it a staffing crisis. We are authorized to have 145 police officers sworn, and we are currently at about 100 and I would say about 115, and I would say 13 or 14 of them are not currently working. So we have 114 on the books, but about 14 of them are not working in a capacity that they can respond to calls for service. And so what I mean by that is there's officers that might be on long-term injury or preparing to retire because of an injury or something like that. And so those officers, I don't have the ability to put in a uniform and put on the street. So in patrol right now, we are we're at, and Tim, Captain Simmons could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the number that we're at is about 45 officers in patrol, and that's to cover 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's not a lot. We don't even have enough officers to cover all of the beats for the 5 teams that we have. So if you're unfamiliar, our city is broken up into 3 districts, Northern, Southern, and Central. And each district has 3 beats. So at any time, there's at least 9 officers that are working. That's our minimum staffing level. That's the number that we said, you know, we really can't go below 9 officers responding because if there's a major emergency or because of the way we have our calls for service, this is the minimum amount of officers it will take to respond to the emergency needs of the community. And so because we don't even have that minimum 9 on each of our patrol teams, we have been doing mandatory overtime signups for our officers for several months now, which means they work their 40 hours a week, but every 2 months, we're requiring them to sign up for additional days that they are mandated to work to cover the beats so that we have enough officers on the streets to do the basic work. Now, as you can imagine, the officers are burnt out. They're tired. They're working, many of them are working at least 50 hours a week, sometimes 60, sometimes 70 hours a week, and they are burnt out. And this is even after we changed the structure of the police department over the last couple years to deal with the declining number of officers that we have. So we've reduced basically almost every unit we can. The last one to go will be our traffic unit, and we are assessing that right now. We only have 3 officers in our traffic unit, and a supervisor, and depending on the amount of officers that we have for deployment next year, we might not even have a traffic unit. That will be the last unit to go. Basically, we will still have an investigation section. It's already been cut by more than half of the detectives. We only have a general crimes unit. There's no specialties within our investigations except for homicide and domestic and sexual violence unit. And all of those units have been cut detective. So we're at very bare minimum to address the issues that we have across the city. So I know a lot of people say, you know, the budget is the big issue, and that's kind of how we started these discussions over a year ago when we were looking at reimagining public safety, and our budget was eventually cut, not by the number that they were anticipating, which was 10 million, but it was cut by 3 million. But during that time, there were also talks of layoffs, because to cut $10 million from our budget, which was the initial demand, there was no way that I would be able to cut that without laying officers off. So we didn't have to lay any officers off, but during those discussions, a lot of officers got scared that they were going to lose their jobs and decided to leave on their own. So we've had officers leaving for a number of years now, and then the amount of officers that have the ability to retire because they have the age and the service years. We just haven't been able to keep up with hiring as much as we're losing people. So that's how we've gotten down to about the little over 100 officers that we currently have. So going back to the budget, I know that, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, we hope that they don't cut your budget. I hope that they don't cut my budget either. But at this point, it's even deeper than that. We have to find a way to retain the officers that we have and to be able to recruit new officers to our department. And that right now is the big challenge. Our Police Officers Association and Management Association are currently, well, not the management yet, but they're about to be, but they're in negotiations for their contract. And right now we're at the bottom of our kind of salary survey. They look at cities similar to ours to see what those police officers are making, and we're at the bottom of that salary survey. And so our Police Officers Association is trying to negotiate for a contract that will at least bring them to the middle kind of that survey, not even at the top, but just middle to be able to hopefully keep some of the people that we have here and be able to recruit new people. There is a special meeting of the City Council tomorrow, which I hope that they're going to discuss that issue and agree to a contract that may help us a little bit with retaining officers. But as we spoke about while we were waiting for this meeting to start, A lot of cities are offering signing bonuses for officers that come to work for them. We're not offering anything special like that. We do, our HR department has recently contracted with a company that's going to help us with recruitment. And I'm looking forward to hearing some hopefully new ideas of how we can recruit. Sorry, the sun is getting my face. New ideas of how we can recruit good candidates to our city. But the hiring process is going to take a while. On a good year, we've only been able to hire about 12 new police officers in 1 year. And that's due to capacity. We only have a limited amount of people to do all the hiring process, and it's very detailed in depth. And then we only have a certain number of officers that are also trained to train new officers. So, it's kind of a downhill effect. We're losing so many officers that I should have brought the number. I think we've separated over 25 people, police officers this year so far, but we've only brought in 7. So the numbers are just upside down, and they continue to be. So those are our challenges that we're facing. The number one challenge is the staffing, and going into 2023, how we're going to be able to respond to the calls and the needs of the community. So that's what we're focused on in the police department right now. I'll stop right there to see. I know it was a mouthful, so I'll see if there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Before you start with questions, do you have any idea how many officers have left after this Reimagined Safety Task Force idea came up?
I don't have the exact number. I could get that for you, but I know for sure it's definitely over 15. And we still continue to have officers leaving. And as a matter of fact, I had a meeting just yesterday with an officer who is an absolutely amazing officer in dealing with mental health issue. He is our mental health officer that partners with the county psych services and stuff like that. And he just told me that he is leaving. So that was just yesterday. We also had somebody doing a background investigation on another one of our female officers yesterday also. So they're continuing to look around for other jobs in other cities. And I do exit interviews with these officers when they leave to see, hey, is there something that we could have done to keep them? If, is there something that I need to be looking at as the leader of the department to change? And many of them often tell me that they hate to leave the department. They love it here, but they don't feel supported by others in the city. And so that's the challenge that I continue to have. So when I say it's not even about the budget anymore, it's about officers feeling secure and safe in their position, feeling secure that, they're gonna have a job, that this issue of, layoffs won't come back up, that, it's kind of like I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't use the analogy, but like somebody that's abused, that you never get kudos for anything, you just kind of get beat down for everything you've done wrong, and there's never really a lot of kudos. And I think a lot of them are feeling that way, like there's just nothing that we can do right, that we're going to get recognition from some city leaders, and they just want to have more support.
Maybe we, the community members, can have a, I don't know, gathering, somehow thank them, and make up for some of that lack of support, because the community really appreciates what you all do, and we need it. I mean, it's one of the most basic city services, public safety, and it's very concerning. Oh, everything you said is very concerning, both sad and concerning.
Yeah, I do think that they do recognize a lot of the community does support us, and we've had a lot more calls in city council and stuff showing that there's a lot of support. Um, yeah, so I think they recognize that, but they also feel the brunt of the complaints when they're responding to a call 3 hours later and the person's yelling at them, and that person doesn't realize how short-staffed we are and really doesn't care about it. And, so that gets kind of old for them too.
That's true, understandable. I have some questions, but I'd like to ask other neighbors if there are any questions before I ask mine. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll start with my questions. So I posted it on Nextdoor. Actually, I recently met a gentleman who complained basically about the digital divide. He said whenever he calls the police department, there's no live person. And I told him police department is understaffed. But he was complaining that in general, if you don't have a computer, if you don't have internet, it's like you're cut off from many services. So I wonder how you see the issue with the police department and if you have any answer.
Sure. So I recognize that we are in a community where there are older people who are not comfortable with technology, and some younger people that just don't want to use it, and some people that don't have the ability to purchase technology to communicate with us. And we discussed that when we were talking about having people go online to make a report, and that there might be some people that don't have the ability to do that. So we actually have computers in the police department that they could come down and use. Or if you don't have the ability to do that, then we have authorized our supervisors to say, yes, we need to send somebody over to that person's house to have a direct conversation with them to get their report, because we understand that, that might occasionally happen.
Very good. Thank you. Steve, go ahead, please, with your question.
I was just wondering, one thing was, has there been any discussion of trying to use some technology to make up for some of the lack of staffing in the police department? I mean, traffic is a really obvious kind of issue, because especially with a small unit you already have and having possibly none, if there was some way to use things like speed cameras or anything that we could sort of relieve the pressure on the police department to do something about those kind of things.
So I had met with the mayor's office not too long ago, and they told me that they have, I think, an intern working on looking at red light cameras for the city. I'm not sure if that's feasible or not. I mean, I know a lot of cities had gone to them years ago, but I don't know many cities that still have them. And I don't know if that's due to issues that around citations for the red light cameras. But I do know the mayor's office is looking into it, which I appreciate, because we just don't have the staff to kind of research some of those things right now. But in terms of the speeding, there's really not an ability to do a citation after the fact. Now we try to do some kind of follow-ups with video and stuff like that for sideshow activity, but again, our staffing severely limits the ability for us to do the follow-up that we need to do. Other departments, when they have sideshows, they do recordings, and so it's, of course, they can't get every car right then and there. However, when they have cars recorded doing sideshow activity, then they do the research on the owners, and they actually travel to other cities and tow the cars away and do citations and stuff like that. We just don't have the capacity to do.
Thank you. Jan, please go ahead.
Just something that I had asked our beat officer about what the ticket is for parking in the red, and I was told $50. Has the city thought about making these ticketing process bigger money so that it is feasible to, I mean, my big thing is at 23rd and Clinton, where the kids are crossing the street, there's a red, it's painted red, but even the crosswalker guy parks right there. You can't see people coming around that corner. So it's really annoying to me that, you know, we don't charge more for parking in the red.
Yeah, so we have one parking enforcement officer and one that just got hired and is currently being trained right now. And so, and their focus has not been on parking citations. As a matter of fact, we haven't really focused on parking citations since the pandemic hit and they took away the ability to cite for, the city council decided they didn't want to cite for the street sweeping, which used to generate a lot of revenue for the city. Back then we had a unit of 5 parking enforcement team members, and they actually generated a lot of revenue between the, you know, parking in the reds and other, you know, parking violations, as well as the street sweeping. Our unit dwindled down to the 1, and the focus has been on abandoned vehicles, and that's just towing abandoned vehicles. So that really just hasn't been the focus. We don't have the staffing to issue citations like that. It's not that we don't want to, we just don't have the capacity. They even cut the number of parking representatives that we have. We have the ability to have 3. We have 1 and then 1 in training, so 2 total, and we need to hire 1 more. And hopefully once we get that 3rd person, maybe we can start some more of the sites like you're describing.
I would like to ask a related question, which is a combination of several questions I heard from different neighbors. One of them is, does enforcement officer actually have to be a sworn officer? Could it be just a regular person? Why is it difficult to have enforcement? And then there was a neighbor who complained there's an abandoned vehicle in front of her house for over 7 months. And she even showed it to an officer, but nothing has happened. Nobody did anything. And the issue of enforcement actually is very important. One of the reasons is that we shared it with our fire chief, Montoya, that on red flag days, we would like to have on some streets saying no parking on red flag days on narrow streets, so people could evacuate quickly. And fire chief said you should ask the police department if they could enforce it. We have no problem with it. So all these enforcement questions, we would appreciate answers.
Yeah, so the first question was, does it have to be a sworn officer? No, it doesn't. And we have civilian, the parking enforcement representatives are all civilian employees. And so they're the ones that go out and do the enforcement. The second question was about abandoned vehicles.
Yes.
And so the parking enforcement also gets the list of abandoned vehicles. I think that sometimes that list, because there's so many abandoned vehicles across the city, grows to over 50. So it might be on the list to take care of, but it takes a bit of time for the parking enforcement to get to, because it was just a one-man show for a while. I'm hoping now that we brought somebody else on, we could clear those out a little better. But we've also been utilizing police officers to tow some of those abandoned vehicles. So sometimes there's what we have training days, and if they get done with training early or something, then we use that time for the officers to go out and just really focus on towing vehicles across the city, where they'll tow 30 cars in a couple of hours. And so, you know, we're really trying to help out the parking enforcement with those abandoned vehicles, but there are a ton of abandoned vehicles all across the city. What I would recommend is, if there hasn't been anything done with that vehicle, there is an abandoned vehicle hotline. And I know it takes a while for the parking representatives to get to, you know, some vehicles, because like I said, it could have 40, 50, 60 vehicles on there from people from various areas of the city calling in, but they will get to it.
Thank you. And I have a question, actually. If isn't it generating revenue, all this enforcement and tickets? And related to that, isn't overtime very expensive? Like with the amount of money we spend on overtime, couldn't we hire new officers? So I don't get why they think it's reducing the budget if we don't hire more officers. Well,
No, so I don't think it's a matter. I think the city council wants us to hire more officers. It's the ability to do so. So hiring an officer takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months, just with all the testing that they have to do. And that's if it's a officer that's currently working at another department, it might be a little bit shorter. But it takes a long time and a lot of effort to hire officers. And the standard of hiring officers is very high. It's been lowered over the years, but it's still a pretty high standard, which it should be. And so we at Richmond are having a hard time recruiting people. So the last testing that we open it up and say we're hiring police. It's actually open all the time. We say we're hiring police officers, please apply. We're going to have a testing on this date. The last time we had, I think, 12 applications. Now, when we set the date for the testing, I think 10 people replied. Out of the 10 that replied saying, yes, I want to be there, I'm interested in a job with you, only 7 showed up the day of the testing. So once they get through if they get through the testing, or if they make it through, I mean, we might only have 1 or 2, maybe 3 viable candidates by the end of the day. Now, when I was testing for police officer here in the city of Richmond, there were over 100 people that showed up for the 4 positions they were hiring for. We just can't get candidates to come even in through the door. And, you know, back when I got hired a long time ago, but, you know, I didn't pay attention to the politics. I didn't even really care about the pay. I just wanted to be a police officer. Well, nowadays, the people coming in are a little bit different. And I'm not faulting them. I'm not saying that there's anything bad about the new people coming in. I'm just saying that they pay attention to those things. They want a work-life balance, whereas I wanted to come in and I want to be at work every single day. I wanted to go out there. This new generation wants a work-life balance. They're interested in seeing how much we're paying compared to other people. And that's why having, you know, a competitive wage is important. They want to see, you know, what kind of support the city is going to give them, because, you know, if they're getting sued and we get sued for a multitude of things, whether we do something wrong or not, you know, is the city going to support them? And these are the things that candidates are saying, nah, I decided I'm going to go somewhere else, because they don't feel like those things are in place in our city.
thank you.
But to answer your question, it would be better if we could just fill our positions as opposed to using overtime. And some people argue, well, the officers are getting paid a lot. They're, you know, working all the overtime, and the officers don't want to work this overtime. They don't want to make this kind of money. They are forced to do this because we don't have enough officers to, you know, fill the positions that we have.
Thank you. Eunice, is that you having your hand up? MacBook Pro? Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
I am sorry. So I've been following this pretty closely, and I think probably everybody on the call has, but I just want to kind of tell you my understanding of it. And Chief French, maybe you could expand a little. I mean, I understand why you aren't able to recruit more officers. My understanding, and by the way, I'm very happy to have you back. I'm so glad. Thank you for coming back. And I really want to be behind you and support you. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
thank you. But my understanding is that you're down to about like 98 active officers, and that by December, if the officers who can retire decide to, you might be down to 80 officers. that, and I was looking at some of the staff reports in July, one of the weekends, you had 24 officers working mandatory 18-hour shifts. The last report I saw said that it was like 17, I believe, and I don't think that's safe for the residents as well as the officers. I can understand why they might be upset, because the programs the city council wanted to implement could have been done with ARPA funds, with no funds cut from the police department. And my understanding, this is what's been cut from the police department. Your criminal violence reduction team is gone. The intelligence unit team is gone. The narcotics unit is gone. Robbery, property theft, investigative units were combined, and officers were reduced. Homicide unit reduced, CSI reduced, understaffed. Maybe that's a better word, I don't know. In your regulatory units in code enforcement, but not staffed. I mean, how can you recruit officers when you don't even have, you can't. Recently, the city council had an agenda item you requested additional 20 officers just to get to basic services for the community to eventually to get back up there. You felt you needed an additional 20 just to have basic services covered. And I just want to say this, that I know that Sohaila does support the RPD. The other person running in our district called in against that proposal at the city council. And so I just hope that everybody, maybe everybody knows all this, and maybe I just feel very strongly about it. So I just wanted to say that, and that's all I have to say. But I strongly support you, and I hope that we can come to a better resolution of all this. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, everything that you said is correct. We've reduced all of those units, and you actually hit the nail on the head. All of those units are gone, and a lot of people came to our agency, chose the Richmond Police Department to work because we had those units. They had the ability to work specialized units and do different things within the police department. And now pretty much, I would say 95% of those specialized units are gone. They don't have the ability to work those anymore. And so when we're talking about recruiting new people or even retaining the ones that we have, it's basically, you're going to come here, you're going to work a lot of overtime, and there's not a lot of room for movement. And so that's why recruiting and retaining officers continues to be a challenge.
So Hayla, can I say something else?
You're muted, Sohaila.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, could you wait until Margaret asks her question first, please? If it's not
Oh,
related.
absolutely. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Margaret, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Bill. I'm Margaret's husband. My question is, does the Richmond Police Department get any assistance from the police departments in neighboring cities or the County Sheriff's Department or CHP?
So we do get assistance if there is a major incident occurring. So if there is, a major emergency, let's say, our hills back here catch on fire, then neighboring agencies will come and help us. It's called mutual aid, but that's a process to get mutual aid. You have to make a phone call. It's a formal process to request additional services. We do work with some of the other agencies on a less formal basis. If we're going after a criminal that's been, across city lines, and we're trying to work together on a specific case or something like that. But on a daily basis, no. The CHP does, is on the freeways in the city of Richmond, and they do come into town, occasionally. But they're not coming into Richmond specifically to enforce traffic laws or anything like that. We've had that in the past, but normally that's when we've had huge spats of violence where we just don't have enough people and the violence is out of control. And so they have to come in and help us out. But on a daily basis, we don't have the help
I
of
turned mine off.
agencies.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. So Marianne? Marianne, if you have a
Yes,
question, go
yeah,
ahead.
I just unmuted. Yes, I do have a question. Thank you very much. Chief French, I'm so glad that, again, to see you here. And I think it was interesting that just an hour before this came on, I was listening to the news on NPR, KQED, and they were talking about this very same subject of across the country, there is such a huge problem in the lack of the difficulty recruiting employees for civil service. And they tried the different, they interviewed the different types of civil service, but also focused in on police and the difficulties, especially that has come up in the more recent, especially since George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter and the reimagining police forces. And sometimes when we try to make improvements, we go a bit overboard and things, swing back and forth. But we are where we are right now. And so as a community member, I'm wondering, what can we as citizens do to help officers feel more supported in the city of Richmond? That's one question. And I know Sohaila had mentioned one thing, and you mentioned officers oftentimes will leave, and in your retention interviews, you may hear things such as lack of work-life balance, which of course it's difficult to have flex schedules when you're having to require overtime, mandatory overtime. So I just can't imagine what it's like to try and manage this. It can only get better, I'm hoping. It seems to me like one of the big things, though, of course, in light of today's economy, is also having a competitive wage, and if and even sign-on bonuses, if that's going to be enough to help them, help people come on, and or resuming some of the revenue producing programs that have been cut. Why cut things that are going to bring in more money? I don't understand that. So if you could shed some light on that, and if there's something that we can do to even specifically encourage the city leaders to do, that would really have a more significant impact on making our Richmond, our RPD feel supported, and let them know that not only the community, but the city leaders will support them as well. It's going to take a while to get out of this mess, I think.
Yeah, and I've been really honest and upfront with our officers that, things are going to be difficult for a little while for us, but they will get better. So to address some of the things, and I should have said this also before, but you reminded me of it, is that our department isn't the only department that's hurting. There's law enforcement agencies across the country that are short-staffed. And so I do want to recognize that and not just say, oh, this is all because city council or something like that. That's not what I'm saying. The issue that I think that we have here in Richmond is that we're having a hard time recruiting, just like everybody else, but candidates now, look at all the benefits of going to certain agencies. And so if we don't have a competitive wage, like you said, and a competitive, sign-on package and, a good work-life balance, all of those things, then of course, we're not going to recruit the best candidates. So those are the things that, I'm pushing for is, to get a good contract. And again, you asked what are some of the things that the community can do. And I would think for our officers to feel supported, they listen to the city council meetings, call in and talk about your support and talk about, you wanting them to, or you want to have a fully staffed police department that's able to address the needs of the community. Call in and talk about the fact that you feel that they should have a competitive wage so that, we can attract and recruit the best candidates out there. So that we can at least just get in the running. Right now, I just feel like we aren't even in the running because of what a lot of the other departments offer. And to throw something out there, the city of San Pablo just got an amazing contract for their officers. And I know they have a casino and they have a lot more money, but they're a lot smaller than us. And to put things in context, I believe their captains make as much as I do as a chief. And they have a tiny, tiny little area that's completely surrounded our city, completely surrounded by our city that they patrol. But yet they are highly paid and they don't address nearly as much of the things that we do. So when a candidate is looking, well, I could go here and basically work for more than what the chief makes in Richmond. Why would I choose Richmond? So, those are those are the things that they're looking at. So those are the challenges. And I'm sorry if I didn't address any of your other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So Eunice, do you still have a question? I don't see your hand up.
I was just going to ask, is it true that it takes about 18 months to bring a new recruit up to speed? Is that about the length of time?
For somebody brand new off the street that doesn't have any law enforcement experience, yes, it takes, like I said, about 4 to 6 months for the hiring process. For you submit an application, you have to do a writing sample, you do an oral interview, you do a physical interview. So that's all another process. Then you have to do a background, which takes pretty much at least a month. We go back as far as, looking at your school transcripts to kind of see what kind of student you were, talking to all your neighbors. Officers go out, or the person doing the background goes out to your house and talks to neighbors, talks to people that you don't even list, because we need to make sure that we're hiring the right people. After that, if you pass that, you have to do a polygraph examination, so they make sure that you're not lying about the things that you're putting down. If you pass that, you have another interview with me. If you pass that interview and I'm ready to hire you, you still have to do a psychological exam. You still have to do a medical exam. And so all these things aren't at our beck and call. We have to wait for appointments and stuff like that. If you finally get to the stage where you get hired, then we put you through the police academy, which is another 6 months of training that you do in the police academy. Once you make it out of the police academy, we have what we call field training, where you learn how to be a police officer in Richmond. The police academy teaches you how to be a police officer in general. The training that we do for another at least 6 months is how to be a police officer in Richmond, specifically the street, and how we do things, procedures and processes here on the street. So that whole process could take about 18 months.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Marianne, do you have another question, or should I go?
Yeah, yes, I do actually.
Sorry, but there's someone else. Is it R. Hadley? They haven't had questions before, so let them go
Okay.
first, and then you ask your question, please.
Right.
Everybody gets, first round of questions. Hadley and then Angela Voto.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to say welcome back. Glad to have you back. Definitely support the blue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any way to recruit from other departments, or what is that? Is that like a unilateral, or from other departments, something that you can offer incentives to draw people from even other places, rural areas where they've already are in departments? I mean, because that might speed up the process.
Yeah, and that has been our strategy for many years, when we offered more of a competitive package. And that's what we talked about earlier on. I'm not sure if you were on the call, but Our ability to offer a competitive wage and package in terms of, the assignments that we offer and stuff like that has been significantly diminished. And that's why we're having a hard time recruiting lateral officers now. And if Captain Simmons is on the call, I believe he might still be on here. He could speak to that because he was a lateral from the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department, where he came over with a lot of recruits that we actually, what we say, stole from the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office at one point. We hired a lot of them, and we actually have hired a lot of officers from different departments, but they were coming over because they liked our community policing model. They liked that we really engaged with the community, something that we haven't been able to do as often. They liked that they had the ability to move around the department and try out new things like gangs and guns, or our vice unit, or our drug unit and stuff like that, where we just don't even have those units anymore because we're so short staffed. So that has been a strategy of ours, Mr. Hadley. Unfortunately, it's just not working anymore because we don't have a lot to offer in terms of what a lot of lateral recruits are looking for.
Thank you. So before we go to Angela, is it correct to assume that the current negotiation determines the level of support that the city council has for the police department and whether we will recruit more?
I think that plays a big part in it. When I did have my exit interview with the mental health officer that was leaving yesterday, he said that it's nothing that the department did. He's been very appreciative of all the opportunities that he's been afforded. But his specific words, and these aren't my words, but he said that he doesn't feel like the the current city council will ever support the police department the way that we should be supported. And he wants to go somewhere where there's more support. And he's concerned that even his position that he's in now as the mental health officer will eventually get cut because of the amount of officers that we're losing. And I can't even put anybody in his position when he leaves because I don't have anywhere to draw from. So they're just concerned about more specialty units, which there aren't very many anymore, being depleted, which they probably will be by the end of the year.
So would it help, to complete my question, would it help if we write to the city council tomorrow morning? Would it affect their decision in the evening, in the special meeting? How can we support?
I think it's a good idea to always tell the city council, what you believe their vote should be and how they should, what they should offer for our officers. I think, the negotiations are always, behind closed doors or in closed session, but they always have an open session beforehand where, community members can voice their opinions about, the contracts or whatever's on the meeting agenda. And so I think that it does help when they hear that, community members are supportive of the police department and they are supportive of us having a competitive contract.
Thank you very much. So it has to be written directly to them, not to the city clerk, or nothing on the agenda. It's behind closed doors. So we write directly to the city council members.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Angela, I kept you waiting. Go ahead, please.
No problem. I actually am a resident of El Sobrani, but I work in Richmond and I live on a hill that oversees Richmond, May Valley. And I've lived here 40 years. There's been, up until the last maybe 5 years, crime's been relatively low in this area. And so has Richmond PD Patrol, which is fine because crime really wasn't out here. But crime has picked up in this area so significantly. And I'm just wondering if your department recognizes it and if there's, hopefully word that there's going to get more patrol out here, because it is getting like the wild west out here. I mean, we've got explosions going off nightly that sound like pipe bombs, to be honest with you. Nobody knows what they are. I'm just wondering if anybody if you've heard of it, if people have addressed you about it, because I mean, I heard the explosion so loud yesterday. I was sitting in my car. I felt it. I didn't even know where it came from, but I felt it. And I don't know what they are, but it's scary.
I don't know if you were here for the beginning of the meeting, but I actually live up here also in the Richmond Hills, and I also hear those explosions. And just to be completely honest and frank with you, there's no way that we can have our officers come and try to determine where that sound is coming from unless people call in and they know, who's doing it or where it's coming from. We only have, we have 2 officers that work up in this area. And when I say this area, I mean from Carriage Hills all the way down to past Hilltop Mall into Parchester. There's 2 officers that work up in this area.
I know. That's what scares the living hell out of me.
Believe me, being a resident, I've felt that. I've had crime occur at my house and in my court, and calling to get an officer to respond here hasn't been easy for myself, and I'm the chief of police. But the amount of crime that happens up here, first of all, we don't have the staffing, nor would we have the justification to bring another officer up here. In an ideal world, if we had the number of officers that we had even 3 years ago, then we would put at least 1 more officer up here to be able to patrol the area. But right now there's no way. We're actually looking at ways to even reduce the 9 officers that we have, because our officers are so, the 9 officers that we have working at any given time, because our officers are so burnt out.
One other question I have is, do you think that offering some sort of housing alternative in the city of Richmond, like cheaper housing for officers or cheaper housing for recruits, do you think that would open the door to possibly an incentive for officers to come here if they had, low or no cost housing available to them? And it not be in Section 8 apartments like others alternatives have had in the past?
Yeah, I definitely, especially the way the housing market is right now, if we offered some type of, housing stipend or down payment, as somebody mentioned earlier, that Antioch is offering $60,000 to their officers to come there as a down payment for housing. I definitely think that would be a great recruiting tool.
Thank you.
But I will say though that I also know the city finances have also been very difficult over the years, and so I don't know if the city has the capacity to even look at something like that. We've been facing budget deficits for many years.
Marianne, go ahead with your other question, please.
Yes, Chief French, I was wondering, I know you mentioned in your hiring process, all the interviewing and so forth that happens. And then toward the end, the candidate is put through, and I gather that's at the department's expense, through the officer training. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do some cities hire pending successful completion of the officer training, and where that city or that department does not have to pay for the officer, that 6-month officer training? Is there some way around that? Would that significantly reduce the cost of hiring?
So the amount of officers out there that are looking for jobs. So to answer your question, there is a way that officers can pay for their own training through the police academy. So there are people that go into the police academy and they're not sponsored, meaning a department is not putting them through, not paying them to go through. They've decided they want to be a police officer, and they've paying on their own to go to the police academy to try to become a police officer. But at the end of that, they still have to get hired by a police agency to become a police officer. Now, because departments are so short-staffed, not just ours, but across the nation, really. Good candidates rarely have to put themselves through the police
Yeah.
academy. It's people that have issues in their background and can't get hired by a police agency that are putting themselves through the police academy. So we do go to the police academies when they're occurring, and we do try to recruit those that aren't hired, but a lot of them just don't make the background process because, again, a lot of them are the ones that are good candidates are getting hired and their agencies are putting them through the academy.
Mhm.
Thank you. I don't see other hands, so I have a couple of questions myself. We are towards the end of our time, so I ask them quickly and I appreciate answers. One is about the Office of Neighborhood Safety. We just heard that they received $6 million. I wonder what it is they exactly do, especially in connection with the police department. How helpful are they? And why is it that they receive the money, our police department doesn't receive any? Thank you.
So we are not tied to the Office of Neighborhood Safety. They are a completely separate, city department. And so there's, even though we do talk to them, by design, their department really does not want to be involved with the police department because they need the credibility with the people that they go out and service. So a lot of the people that they're talking to, we know are involved in gang violence or gun violence. And so there's kind of by design, we stay separate because we don't want the people that they're contacting to think, oh, they're working for the police. Well, they don't want them to think that. They need that credibility with their clientele. So there's not a lot of, we do share information with them. And a lot of times that's one way, but I'm not saying that in a bad way. They have to be able to be credible. And occasionally they have given us information if they feel like there's impending violence that they can't stop, then they have notified us, hey, you might want to have officers in this certain area because they are concerned about the violence in the streets too. That's their job, is to try to deter and deter the violence. So I'm not sure what the money that they got, what it's for or anything like that. Like I said, we're kind of completely separate. We don't kind of commingle much.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Alejandro, please.
Soheila, thank you. We met the other day. And
Yes, thank you for
yeah,
coming.
thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Your Chief French, thank you for joining, making the time available. And this has been very eye-opening for me. I didn't realize it was in such, I'm going to use the word dire strait. Just because of the trend, right? I'm looking at trends here. If I have, I guess, a statement and a comment, or a question. If these trends continue, right? You mentioned 25 officers left, you hired 8, so net loss of 17. I think that was what was said, something like that. What's the point of no return? It's like I think someone here on the call said we're really down to 88 or about there approximately. And we keep going like that. And the trend, there's nothing that I've heard thus far that shows that it's going to change. This is, someone also said, the Wild West. I mean, there's lawlessness. There's really nothing. When I walk my children to school, I'm here, I'm like, I didn't realize. I was like, wow, okay. You really, everyone's out for themselves. Like, you're alone. That's basically what's happening. Like, and then the high school right across the street, they just started. These kids really, they're on their own too. We're on our own. So then there was a common theme. City council, right? Not feeling supported. And then even the NPR story across the nation, there's a common theme: support for the officers not feeling supported. We can do something. I'm not sure, maybe Soheila, put you on the spot. How can you, maybe in the chat, how can we communicate with our city council, right? Remove some of the barriers. I'm not sure how can we do that, but
I will
it's
send
very
an email.
concerning.
Alejandro, I will send an email to everyone tonight. I
Mhm.
will provide all city council members' email addresses, and I will ask you to write to them, please.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can write by tomorrow before noon.
Sure.
They
Sure,
receive
for sure.
all the comments. Appreciate
No.
it. And tell your
No,
neighbors.
absolutely. No, this is concerning, right? I mean, it's like, whoa, this, I didn't realize it. I was just capturing some notes and all. I was like, damn. So I've seen in the news, right? Other mayors calling in the National Guard. When do we get to that point? I mean, this is the trend is not good. And then we're not in a position. My other question is, okay, if we're not attractive to new recruits, what do we have to do to make ourselves attractive? Right? What package is out there? Man, not a request, demand from our city council.
Yeah, so the first part of your question, in terms of the point of no return, we're not there yet. But what would happen is if we got to, I would say 50, 60 officers, we would be in contact with probably the sheriff's department to see if what kind of contracting we might be able to do with them. But I also know that they're short-staffed, and you know, the county sheriff would be the agency that we would call upon for help. I'm not sure that the sheriff would agree to it, but that would be the next step. And you mentioned some others, National Guard, you know, if crime was out of control, or you know, CHP to come in to do some work. But again, those agencies have to agree to do so. We're not there yet. So I you know, even though it's in the back of my mind and we've had some conversations internally about that, I don't want to think about that or focus on that. My focus is on recruiting and retaining the officers that we have. And I don't want it to make it seem like this is all about money. This is about a good contract, a fair contract, a contract that is comparable to other agencies like ours. We're not trying to be at the top of the pay scale in the county or in the area. We just want a fair and equitable contract. And I think that that's probably the first step. But again, money isn't the answer either. It's the show of support that, hey, we support you all. We are going to work towards getting to at least 165 officers, always, you know, staying at that number, as opposed to looking to cut. Those are the things that I think that, you know, would show our officers that the city council supports us. They want us to get up to 165 officers, and that's where we're moving towards. And there's no more talks of cuts and stuff like that.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, competitive, right? Have our city be competitive. I mean, to attract and retain, and also respect the very difficult job that you all do. I mean, it's not easy. And then, yeah, I mean, that was the other part, right? And then just how could we really demand this from our city council, because they're the ones pulling the strings. And we all have our capability in elections coming up, and put people in there who really care.
Yeah, and please inform your
safety.
neighbors, pass the word to others. Many people don't know, Alejandra, the real, you know, status of the police department and the crisis that the chief talked about. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Chief French, before we go on, we usually keep it to an hour for our guests to come back again. Is it okay to extend it by 10 minutes? Okay, thank you very much. So Annette, and then Captain Simmons, because it's the first time it's raising hand, and then it's Steve. Go ahead, Annette.
Thank you, Chief French, and thank you, Sohaila. I'll try to keep it short since I know we're on the clock. You talked about HR is working with consultant to try and get the hiring moving along. And as a retired HR professional, I think a lot about recruitment all the time and creative strategies for getting the appropriate people, the well-trained people in the seats or in the cars or on patrol. Has it been looked at if maybe you can hire trained consultants or contract employees in the interim to fill in if the numbers become so low by the end of the year, to hire trained consultants, maybe former police officers, retirees recently from either our department or other departments that could come on a part-time basis to possibly fill in with their skill set while we do active recruitments in the interim. And yeah, I'll just stop there. And I did have a second piece.
Sure. So that's we've so there's PERS, which is our retirement system, only allows for certain parameters in which an employee can retire and come back to work under, for a certain amount of hours. And I'm actually in the process of trying to do that with my assistant chief who recently retired until I could get a new assistant chief in place. But there's a lot of parameters in which we have to try to work around to have that happen. Once you retire from the PERS system, the retirement system that we're under, a lot of times you have to wait 6 months. You can only work a certain amount of hours. It can mess with your retirement if you make over a certain amount of money and stuff like that. So it's not an easy process to do.
I understand. And as far as maybe not retirees, but maybe younger recruits, millennials or that era, are there any strategies to appeal to them using social media or digital ads, something that they're more comfortable with to be more appealing?
Yeah, so we've over the last few years, we've contracted with different advertising agencies to do just that, like come up with these spectacular web pages that highlighted all the great things about our agency. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm getting ready to go in contract with a company that helps recruits through the hiring process, which has also been a challenge. I talked earlier about all the things somebody has to do to get hired, and it could be overwhelming, especially for somebody that's not familiar with, law enforcement, doesn't have somebody that they know in the system. And so this particular company, once a person shows that they're interested on our website, it contacts them and it basically pairs them with somebody from our department every step of the way to try to help them and prepare them to get through the entire testing process, even going into the academy and coming on board. So we're hoping that we will have some success there also.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Captain Simmons, please.
Yes, hi, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to reiterate an idea that the chief had mentioned earlier. She's reiterated it twice that money is not the sole solution to retaining the officers that we have or even recruiting new ones, and I completely agree with that. The dynamic of city leaders and the community at large really showing their support, I would say, is just as important, if not maybe even more important than the compensation side of things. And the officers that we currently have, they absolutely tune into city council meetings, and so do potential recruits. I've worked in the recruiting unit for many years, and we've lost recruits out of the process who have engaged in city council meetings or watched them and kind of said, hey, I don't really want to get involved at this time. It seems like there's some instability at the political level, and I'm not really interested in that. So when citizens call in during open forum and they hear you, they hear your opinions, they hear your voices, they hear your echoing support, and I'm telling you, the value of that is worth its weight in gold. And I just really want to encourage that process. If you really feel like you want to help turn the tide of how people, potential officers and current officers, feel about coming to work or staying to work in the city of Richmond, no better way to do that than to make your voices of support heard in a formal open forum council session, because that goes a really, really long ways on both sides of the spectrum, helping us recruit and helping us maintain those that we currently have. And so I just really wanted to highlight that point that has been brought up.
Thank you very much. Very important point. I wrote down some of what you said and I'll include it in my email. I really appreciate it. Steve, you'll have the last question.
And I just want to say I have 5% battery left. I'm sorry. So I hope your question is quick, Steve.
I'll try to work fast. You know, I don't want to take any attention away from working on the council because that's something we really need to do. But as we talk about this, I'm beginning to wonder if maybe we shouldn't be talking to our state legislators about this stuff too. You know, I mean, Buffy Wicks is pretty simpatico, and so is our senator. And just to begin to raise this thing, because this is not the only place, obviously, where we're having a problem. There are problems statewide, and maybe the state ought to start paying some attention to it. Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out.
Okay, thank you very much. So Chief, if you would like to end it on a positive note, we would very much appreciate it. Many people, you know, may not be able to fall asleep tonight with so many concerns and stresses about the current.
I don't want this to be all doom and gloom. The good thing is that despite our staffing shortages, crime has not gone up significantly. As a matter of fact, it's down slightly. So that's a positive thing. I know some people have expressed some concerns about some of the crime that's occurring and seeing less officers, but in general, crime is down slightly. Now, we have to take into consideration that we don't take a lot of reports now, so that might be driving the numbers down. People know that we're not going to respond to something, so a lot of times they just don't call. But if you call, there's an emergency going on, we will respond. We continue to respond. We continue to respond in good time to actual emergencies where somebody needs help right away. That's our specialty. That's what we've always done, and that's what we'll continue to do, even if we're only responding to the emergency stuff. So it's not all doom and gloom. We are still here for you. We are still here to serve you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you back. And if there's anything you would like to share with the community, let me know. We'll have a Zoom session again, and we hope to have you back soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. And thank you, Captain Simmons, too. Have a good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.